Welcome in, everybody. It is Friday, May 18th, 2022. My name's Jason High. We're going to have a little bit of a sports update here. If you want to do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe button, I'm going to keep producing videos here, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today. So let's get to the Kansas City Chiefs and also the NFL and all the moves that have been going on this week. Yeah, you guys have been seeing it probably more so and just as much as I have. The NFL has had a lot of crazy deals go down, even just within the last hour. Deshaun Watson just got traded to the Cleveland Browns, which initially it was looking like he was maybe going to go to the NFC. And then more specifically, the AFC West in particular has gotten very strong right now with additions like Russell Wilson going to the Broncos, Devontae Adams going to the Raiders, Khalil Mack going to the Chargers. The AFC West has been making all sorts of moves this week, and the teams have been getting better. So let's see what the Chiefs have been doing so far to try to counteract those moves and what we think of that. So the first move and topic of discussion I'm going to get to today is how the Chiefs have went ahead and they got their safety very early on in the week. That was their first big move that they made. They signed the former Texans safety Justin Reid to a 3-year contract. This guy essentially is going to replace Tyrann Mathieu. That's essentially what he was brought here for, not as a direct replacement, but he's going to come in to play safety. The Chiefs needed a safety. They had a need at safety with really only Juan Thornhill and Armani Watts being the only safeties on the roster, with Juan Thornhill being the only one that's actually a proven commodity. And the Chiefs had a need once they let Tyrann Mathieu hit free agency. They did allow him to walk and hit free agency. He has not signed with another team thus far, which I do think is interesting, and I do think that we'll keep an eye on that. I would be very surprised at this point if the Chiefs decided to still bring back Tyrann Mathieu after giving Justin Reid that 3-year, $30 million deal. But that being said, the Chiefs may not like what they're seeing on other parts of the market when it comes to other players that they're potentially going to sign, and they may go ahead and try to load up on the safety position. And, you know, if that's a strategy they want to go with, I'm not really opposed to that. I would like to see them personally continue to upgrade the pass rush, but we'll get to that in just a second. But look, Justin Reid looks like he's going to be a really fun player for the Chiefs. He can hit, he can cover, he's got good ball tracking skills, and Justin Reid really didn't have an opportunity to win a lot in Houston. He was not in a very good spot the last 2 years with the team he was playing on, and he, quite frankly, didn't have an opportunity really, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a defensive coordinator like Steve Spagnuolo, and on an organization like the Chiefs that's ready to win and wants to win a lot. So I'm excited to see what happens there. It is going to be really tough to see whenever Tyrann Mathieu does, which I think he will, sign with another team. It's going to be tough to see him go, but Tyrann Mathieu did a lot of great things here with Kansas City. He helped bring a Super Bowl here. But Tyrann Mathieu is about to be 30. He's turning 30 years old this season. And just doing a side-by-side comparison, Justin Reid's 25. And that's kind of the nature of the game. You really always, at the NFL in particular, you're looking to get cheaper and younger at any position, and I think the Chiefs did that in this case. As far as the free agents ranking goes, Tyrann Mathieu was ranked much higher per Pro Football Focus. He was the number 18 free agent, whereas Justin Reid was actually somewhere in the 90s. But Pro Football Focus isn't always right, and from what a lot of the film experts, coaches, all the guys around the league have been saying, from what I've been seeing, is that they really are excited about Justin Reid, and they think that he has the potential to get better as a player versus Tyrann Mathieu as a player that's going into his age 30 season. Look, safeties can still be very good late into their mid-30s, but it's also, the odds are stacked against you whenever you start to hit that age. We're going to move on to the next move, or in this case, it's somewhat of a lack thereof so far for moves for the Chiefs. So last week I talked about the top 2 things I wanted to see the Chiefs go after, and in terms of positions, and the number 1 and 1A for me was improving the pass rush. I do believe that the Chiefs need to work on their pass rush. I think Brett Veach knows that they need to work on their pass rush and that they need to improve that position so they can continue to get after the quarterback. A move that they made, which will probably have Chiefs fans being a little bit polarized here, as they did decide to bring back Frank Clark on a cheaper contract. They've restructured Frank Clark's contract. with the way that Frank Clark's contract had worked initially, they pretty much only spent about an extra $1 million to $2 million to actually keep Frank Clark on the roster versus cutting him. So Frank Clark had about $12 million guaranteed coming to him this season no matter what. The Chiefs, per what I've seen, are going to be paying him roughly $13 to $14 million this season, and they will be on the hook next year for some money if they do decide to cut him after this year. I'm okay with this move. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. You're getting a player essentially for free because you were going to have to pay him almost the same amount of money for him to be on another team. And you would have had to have put more money into that position. And quite frankly, the edge rushers that were out there were just going for way too much money. At least that first wave of free agency guys were, to where you were not going to be able to get those guys probably anyways without seriously inhibiting your ability to go improve other positions on your roster, like safety, like what we're going to get to next, wide receiver, and like even just bringing other guys back. The Chiefs re-signed Andrew Wiley, the right tackle, this week. They also brought back the fullback, Burton. And those are moves that I think I'm very happy with, particularly Andrew Wiley. I know he's gotten kind of a bad rap because of the pressure he's been under lately, but bringing him back as a backup, good solid depth piece at right tackle is a move I like. They got him for $2.5 million. That's about as cheap as you're going to get for a veteran. They still have Lucas Niang there as their hopeful right tackle of the future. He played pretty well last season. He wasn't great from what everyone says and kind of just from what my eye test saw, but he was holding his own. And for a first-year player, I think I'm excited to see, and I think the Chiefs are going to wait and see if they can if he can improve on a trajectory. And I'm not really sure if the Chiefs are going to put any more resources into that right tackle position in terms of free agents. I could see them going there with a draft pick, but I'm not sure about free agent money at this point because they do still have other needs as of right now, as of 5 p.m. on Friday, March 18th. All right, so yeah, in terms of other pass rushers that are out there, a lot of free agents have already signed. The big name ones, Von Miller, Chandler Jones, Randy Gregory, they're all off the board. They all signed with teams, and all of them, in all cases, got big money. Chandler Jones ended up going to the Raiders, so we're actually going to be playing against him now. Chandler Jones and Von Miller are 32 and 33 years old, respectively. They got a lot of money. They could still be very good players for the next 2 to 3 years. It's very possible. But the Buffalo Bills and the Las Vegas Raiders are going to pay a lot of money to find out. And the truth is that I would have been excited had we gotten Von Miller or Chandler Jones. But I also have to look at the big picture here. And if the Chiefs weren't comfortable giving that much money to a pass rusher that's over the age of 31, 32 years old, I can't really blame them too much for that. We've seen how those contracts have worked out in the past with guys that are a little bit older, and you don't really want to spend money on guys like that. And I think we're starting to notice a pattern here so far with Brett Veach's offseason, with potentially letting Tyrann Mathieu walk and then also deciding not to give big money to guys like Von Miller and Chandler Jones. Zadarius Smith is still out there. Now, he was going to sign with the Ravens yesterday, but he ended up backing out of that deal, probably because he saw what Von Miller signed for and that he thought he could get more money. It may be in Kansas City, it may not be. Zadarius Smith would be a guy I'd be very interested in. He is 30 years old, 31, but he's a little bit younger than those other guys. He does have an injury history that's recent in terms of he did miss last season, most of last season, with a injury to his core or his back. It was something like that that was important, obviously, for a defensive end. But you're still talking about a player that's only 31 years old and has a pretty extensive history of being a good pass rusher. I'd be interested in Zadarius Smith, but for the same reasons as those other guys, I also wouldn't be too upset if he goes to another team. What I would personally do so far, based on who I'm still seeing that's out there, Daniel Hunter, Vikings defensive end Daniel Hunter, is a guy that I think the Chiefs might be looking at targeting, and I think other teams might be too. He is 28 years old. He did miss all of the 2020 season with a back problem, and then he missed the second half of last season with a separate pectoral injury problem. So he does have a little bit of recent injury history, but even last season, he had 6 sacks in the 7 games that he did play before he got injured. He's 28. He's got 2 years left on his contract. If the Vikings are trying to unload him by this weekend because he's due a roster bonus on Sunday, That'd be a player I'd be interested in if I'm the Chiefs. They also might be able to just sign him in free agency next week if they think that they're going to want to let him get to free agency. But if the Chiefs announce tomorrow that they've traded a third or a fourth round pick for a established defensive end like him, I'm interested in that. That's a player I'm interested in. You're not going to have to pay huge money. He's making $14 million a year the next 2 years, which is quite a bit, but the Chiefs would not have to owe him all of that guaranteed money because the Vikings are going to have to pay quite a bit of it if they trade him or if they release him. So we'll see what the Vikings do there. They may keep him, they may trade him, but it looks like they're going to either trade him or cut him at this point. If the Chiefs don't go a route like that and invest a draft pick in a trade, where I personally would like to see them go, and I'm just a guy sitting here talking, but I'd like to see them go after a guy like Jason Pierre-Paul. Jason Pierre-Paul's 33 years old. He is older, but I think that's a guy that you might want to see if he still has something left in the tank. You're going to get a guy like him on a one-year contract. It's going to be pretty cheap. You're not going to have to pay a big investment. Then you can go get a defensive end in the draft for a longer-term fix. I would say the exact same thing for Melvin Ingram. Melvin Ingram did really well when he came here. He was pressuring the quarterback. He still looked like he had something left in the tank. I'd love to bring Melvin Ingram back or Jason Pierre-Paul. Fletcher Cox is another guy I'd be interested in. He is a defensive tackle, but he's still someone that can get after the QB a little bit. If the Chiefs decide to go that route and try to get pressure from the defensive tackle position versus the defensive end, I feel like that's kind of what the Chiefs tried to do last year with Jarran Reed. Kind of didn't really work out the way we had hoped it would. Jarran Reed had some flashes here and there, particularly later in the season, but I saw he had a visit with the Cincinnati Bengals earlier today. I'm not sure if that's a guy that the Chiefs are probably going to bring back. All right, so the other position of need that I outlined last week that I really would like to see the Chiefs handle is one that they handled within about the last hour. The Chiefs just signed Juju Smith-Schuster from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a 25-year-old wide receiver who has 3 800-yard seasons under his belt, and he did have that one 1,400-yard season, his second or third year in the league, whenever he really put up some numbers. So Juju is a good guy for the Chiefs, man. I'm excited to see him come here. The Chiefs needed another number 3 pass catcher. They've kind of been looking for that ever since Sammy Watkins left. And I think Juju is a really nice upside play at 25 years old. I think he could be really good for you. The Chiefs almost signed him last year, and they offered him actually more money than he ended up getting with Pittsburgh, from what reports said. You know, Andy Reid was sending him pictures of the Lombardi Trophy and trying to get him here. And so I think the Chiefs wanted Juju. This was a guy that I think a lot of people really had going to the Chiefs probably early, and I like getting him for a one-year, $10 million contract. I think that's good value for a player of his caliber, and I think that he's going to make the Chiefs' offense better. Yeah, and that's a guy that you can always extend, too. He's not a guy that's just necessarily a one-year rental. If he's playing well for you and you see the good things from him, you can hand him a contract extension. You could even franchise tag him if you feel like that's something you need to do next season. So I like the Juju Smith-Schuster signing. I think that's a good one, and I'm happy about that. So outside of wide receiver, I would say that, and defensive end, those are the two positions that the Chiefs really needed to address. I think they're still going to probably make another move at defensive end. I think they're probably done at wide receiver for right now, other than the draft. I could see them going into the draft and addressing both of those positions early on. That's probably the way that I would go about it, but we'll see. Brett Veach has had kind of a history and a tendency to not necessarily hang on to his first-round picks, so we'll see if the Chiefs actually are still picking at number 30 this year or if that pick has been traded to somebody. I would be excited either way. I trust Brett Veach with the moves that he's made when he's brought in trades for draft picks. Orlando Brown worked out well. And so I like that he did that, but I also like that I like the ability of Brett Veach to draft well. His drafts were looking kind of so-so going into last season, but he nailed last season's draft, man. Getting Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith in the same draft, 3 impact rookies like that. Whew, watch out. All right, so I'm going to stray away from the Kansas City Chiefs for a little bit, and we're just going to talk real quick about the Kansas City Royals. They signed Zach Greinke this week to a one-year, $13 million deal. I'm excited about that, man. I'm 29 years old, so I still remember what it was like to watch Zach Greinke pitch here in Kansas City, and it was amazing. He was so good, and I know he's not the same guy now probably, but he is still a solid pitcher. Make no mistake, the Royals did not make this move just for nostalgic purposes. This isn't Dwayne Bowe signing a one-day contract with the Chiefs so he can retire type thing. Zach Greinke's still a good pitcher. He had a 4.1 ERA and 100